pour terminer cette table ronde, avant de donner la parole un peu à la salle, la dernière intervention sera celle de Ramon Grosfoguel, qui va aborder une question vraiment tout à fait importante, fondamentale, qu'il pose en termes d'alliance. Quelles sont les possibilités et les impossibilités de l'alliance entre la gauche occidentale, ou occidentalisée, hein, et le mouvement décolonial par rapport à la crise de civilisation que nous connaissons. Et je pense que cette impasse politique est effectivement un élément majeur, et peut-être d'ailleurs que plus que la question d'une alliance entre ces deux formes, la question qui est posée, c'est la question de la construction d'un nouveau courant d'émancipation qui pourrait être effectivement à la hauteur des enjeux actuels. Bon, Ramon, merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Je préfère de parler en anglais parce qu'il y a des traductions. S'il n'y a pas de traduction, j'essaie de faire la présentation en français, mais avec la traduction.
Il y a une traduction.
Il y a des traductions. Donc, je vais parler en anglais. Je préfère expliquer tout ça en anglais. C'est aussi pour faire une explication plus vite, parce qu'en français, pour moi, c'est plus long d'expliquer tout. Donc, I'm going to present this in English because there is translation here. I prefer to do it in English because in French it would take me longer to say the same thing. Basically, English is a language that, as you know, is very practical to the point. You know, so in situations like this, we need English. In situations where we need to go more deeper into things, we need other languages. I agree with that. So anyway, so basically what I want to do is to present. There is the equipment on the back for those of you who cannot follow English. What I want to do now is very fast go over the question of what is the meaning of racism for Fanon. I want to go there first before we discuss the question about the contradictions with the white left or the westernized left, okay, and possibilities, impossibilities of working together or doing alliances, political alliances. Because without that understanding, it makes, I think, no sense what I'm going to say later about the white left. Let me first say, very fast, that for Fanon, racism is not an issue of stereotypes or prejudice only, okay? For Fanon, always racism is about institutional, structural racism. If you don't have structures implementing racist practices, prejudice, stereotypes stay in the head of people and do not affect any population. You know, so to have racism is not enough, you know, to have stereotypes or prejudice, because I can have a stereotype of other people, but if I don't have institutions, power structures affecting the life of those people in significant ways, it stays in my head. I can go to sleep, and the people I have prejudice about won't be affected. To be affected, you have to have structures, institutions that are, in effect, affecting the life of a population in significant ways. Okay? That's the first point. I don't have time to develop that. There are many nuances to say about that, but I will stop here. Second point, racism is not defined by the marker. We tend to define racism based on the marker. That is, we used to think that what defines racism is the way racism is marked. And what I want to say, following Fanon, is that racism can be marked in different ways. In colonial history, you have different ways through which race and racism was marked. You have color racism, color being used as a marker, but you have also ethnicity used as a marker. You have also religious identity that was historically and still used as a marker. And so you have many markers to mark racism. So there's not only one form of marking racism. Third point is, if race and racism can be marked in different ways, then what is the definition of racism? If you could mark race on the basis of color, or on the basis of religious identity, or on the basis of ethnicity, or on the basis of language, or there are many markers, then what is racism? What defines racism? Okay? And here is where I think Fanon makes a fundamental contribution. I think that I'm taking here some of the contributions of the Caribbean Fanonian philosophers. Okay? Caribbean Fanonian philosophers who have developed the thought of Fanon in relation to this question. Okay? What I'm trying to do is to translate the question that they have developed from Fanon into more or less social theory. You know, not only philosophy, but social theory. And so, for Fanon, racism is always a structure, an institution, a power hierarchy of superiority, inferiority along the line of the human. Okay? Racism is a power hierarchy, an institution, a structure of superiority, inferiority along the line of the human. How do you mark superiority, inferiority? Could be done through the color of skin, could be done through religious identity, could be done through ethnicity, could be done through many markers that have been used historically by the colonizers in colonial history. And this is very important to understand because one of the countries that mostly oppose defining Islamophobia as a form of racism in the European Union is France. Because they are using the definition of color to define racism. And because Muslims have many colors, they assume that they cannot be, Islamophobia cannot be a form of racism because racism in any case is about color of skin. This kind of definition is very problematic because it's taking the marker for the definition. You understand? The definition is not the marker. There's something else that defines racism that is not the marker. We cannot get lost in the marker. Okay? The definition used by Fanon is very clear. Superiority, inferiority along the line of the human in relation as a structure, as a power structure of institution, hierarchy, etc. Okay? So, if you take that line and you put above it the S of superior equal the human, okay? Equal the human. The superiors are the human. The inferiors, below the line, the people dehumanized are subhumans or non-humans. Subhuman, non-human is very important because in colonial history, you always have divide and rule. And so you put subhuman, non-human as a dividing line so that the people dehumanized below the line of the human cannot look at each other together. That is, they start seeing each other in competition and cannot work together and fight back politically to the structures of domination, racial domination. So this subhuman, non-human is very important. The people inferior are dehumanized, subhuman, non-human. And then there's something else that Fanon brings in that I think is very important and has been developed by the Caribbean Fanonian philosophers, which is that above the line, you have the superiors who are equal to the human, who are equal to zone of being, the zone of being. Okay? This is a Fanonian concept. Okay? Zone of being. What does this mean? This means that being here relates to all the forms of social existence. Okay? To all the different forms and manifestations of social existence. The forms of a concept of beauty and concept of good taste, that is the aesthetics that the people above the line, the superior beings, define as good taste and beautiness, is considered equal to the human. The forms of thinking, epistemology, that are associated with the people above the line of the human are considered superior ways of thinking. Okay? The forms of pedagogy of the people above the line of the human are considered the superior forms of pedagogy. So what Fanon is pointing at here, I can go over the list, it's a long list of things, is that racism is a very profound structure in the world we live, okay? Because it's not just that you've been discriminated in the labor market. It's not just that you've been discriminated in your citizenship rights, which that is already a major problem for the victims of racism. But it's also that you have aesthetic racism. It's also that you have epistemic racism. It's also that you have pedagogical racism. It's also that you have racism cutting across all the different activities of human existence. Okay? And this is what he calls the Manichaean division of the world. Okay? He's showing the ontology of the system. He's showing how the system ontologizes differences and develop a superiority along an ontological argument. Now, Fanon is not doing an ontology of that. Fanon is doing a diagnosis, which means he's deontologizing the ontology of the system. And I'm saying that because many people read Fanon as if he was ontologizing race and so on. On the contrary, he's calling attention to how the system is ontologizing race and racism, and what he's trying to do is deontologizing that, showing how that's a false ontology, and that's a false definition of the human. So you could see that in zone of being, non-being, in the zone of non-being, you have the same activities. You know, I forgot one. The form of brain of the people above the line of the human are considered the superior human forms of religiosity. Okay? People below the line of the human, people who are being dehumanized, okay, dehumanized, all their aesthetics, their forms of good taste and beautiness, their forms of praying, their forms of thinking, their pedagogy, all their human activities is considered close to the animal world. Okay? Dehumanized, non-human, subhuman. So what Fanon is pointing at.
5 minutes is one third.
No. Sorry, I have still 10 minutes because I'm counting when I began. So I still have 10 minutes. I'm counting with my clock. Okay. So anyway, I continue. So the point is the following. In the zone of being, in the zone of non-being, you have then the dehumanization of the subjects who are classified below the line of the human, and all of their human activities are considered to be non-human, animal-like, close to the animal world, barbarian, savages, etc. Okay? So, including their form of praying, including their forms of aesthetics, including their pedagogy, including their epistemologies, etc. Okay? So, this is a very profound thing that I think Fanon is bringing to the table, that I think is very important to keep in mind, because racism is enough that is already an economic and political problem, but on top of that, it has all these other dimensions that makes it more of a civilizational problem, okay? Because it's not reduced to an economic system. It's more than that. It's a civilizational problem. It's a systematic dehumanization of the majority of the population of the world below the line of the human, including all their human activities, okay, who are classified as inferior. Now, in the zone of being, it's not a homogeneous zone. It's a zone that is conflicting. There are many conflicts inside the zone of being. You have class conflict, zone of being, the superior, the humans, okay? You have class conflicts there. You have gender conflicts. You have sexual conflict. You have national colonial conflicts, okay? So you have many conflicts. It's not a homogeneous zone, okay? There is an intersectionality there of oppressions. inside the zone of being that we need to look at carefully, okay? It's not, we cannot think of zone of being as a homogeneous space. The same thing happened in the zone of non-being. There are all these conflicts of class, gender, sexuality, national, colonial, all of this, okay? This is very important to understand that there are intersectionality operation in both sides. The difference is that there is an I other oppressed, an oppressor and an oppressor, I other. There is another in the zone of being, okay, who is oppressed along class, gender, sexual, national, colonial lines, okay? But all the people in the zone of being, they all live racial privilege. Even the people oppressed in the zone of being live racial privilege. Because they are, even an oppressed in the zone of being is considered part of the human, and the oppressor extend to them certain ways of handling conflicts that I'm going to define in a second, okay? That makes a huge difference. And that means that people, even the oppressed in the zone of being, live their oppressions, mitigated, diminued by racial privilege. Okay? In the zone of being, you have people living class oppression, gender oppression, sexual oppression, national colonial oppression, all of that, but aggravated by racial oppression. Aggravated. In the zone of being, all the oppressions, even an oppressor, live all those oppressions, mitigated, diminued by racial privilege. In the zone of non-being, they live all the oppressions, accentuated, aggravated by racial oppression. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Aggravated, mitigated. Underline these two words, because I haven't explained that. And this is fundamental to understand Fanon and the concept of race in Fanon. Okay? What that means is the following. It means that the way the system manages conflicts in the zone of being, the materiality of domination in the zone of being is through regulation and emancipation. What that means is regulation, codes of law. The oppressed in the zone of being, their humanity is recognized, and therefore there is an extension of codes of law, civil rights, labor rights, women's rights, etc., okay? And emancipatory discourses, freedom, equality, liberty, etc., that are extended to the oppressed by the oppressor in the zone of being. What that means is that the oppressions in the zone of being are lived fundamentally in peaceful ways with exceptional moments of violence. Okay? As a rule, the conflicts, class conflict, gender conflict, sexual conflict, national colonial conflicts, are lived fundamentally with peaceful methods with exceptional moments of violence. In the zone of non-being, all these oppressions, class, gender, sexuality, national colonial, the way the system handles the conflicts is through violence and dispossession. Violence and dispossession with exceptional moments of peace. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. So the lived experience of class oppression, the lived experience of gender oppression, the lived experience of sexual oppression, the lived experience of national colonial oppression is completely qualitatively different in the zone of being than in the zone of non-being. For one single reason, because of the materiality of domination. If your humanity is not in question, then it's extended to you codes of law, regulation, emancipatory discourses that allows to negotiate the conflict in peaceful ways with exceptional moments of violence. Because the people below the line of the human, their humanity is in question, they're dehumanized. The methods used by the system as a rule to manage the conflicts through the materiality of domination of violence and dispossession. Okay? And so this, the rest of the earth are in the zone of non-being. The privilege of of the earth are in the zone of being. Now, so far I'm giving you an abstract concepts. I want to give you a few examples. National colonial oppression in the zone of being. Zone of being is not a geography. It's a positionality in structures of racial power domination. It's a positionality, it's not a geography, although it has space, dimensions, and expressions. Okay? But it cannot be reduced to a geography. What he is talking about here is about a positionality in a racial hierarchy. So let's take the national colonial oppression. The Catalans in Spain, they go and bring 2 million people in the streets demanding independence, and nobody's killed. Nobody's killed. Everybody comes back home alive. Okay? In Palestine, you don't need to do a demonstration to be killed. You're already killed before you go to the demonstration. This gives you the clue to understand the difference between the way the system managed to make race, and racism is about a dehumanization of some people, humanization of others, and a materiality of domination that is implemented in both zones that makes a huge difference in how you live your life, okay, or how you live your death, okay? So the point is, I'll give you another example, class oppression. You have white workers in the global north that despite the crisis and all of that, when they have a job, etc., and they have a conflict with a corporation, they can do a demonstration. They can go to court and take the corporation to a court. They can do a strike. They can organize a union, and they know that tonight they go back home alive. They won't be killed. There are exceptional moments when that happens, but it's not the rule. Okay? In the class oppression, the zone of non-being, the people who are trying to do a strike, or trying to organize a union, or trying to take the corporation to a court, they know they risk their life. Because the way the system managed conflicts in those zones, because of the dehumanization of the population there, which by the way, 90% of the proletariat of the world today in the maquiladoras are women of color, and we have to say that, are women of color. The way the system managed conflict there is through violence and through dispossession. And so that's what racism is about. So we don't need to have moral definition of racism where we need to educate some people that they don't know better. No. The problem of racism is a political problem, and it's an institutional problem, and can only be defeated by destroying zone of being, non-being. You cannot have this structure and get the people oppressed fighting for recognition in the zone of being, because that recognition is going to live intact. It's going to live intact zone of being, non-being. And you're just asking, oh, I'm as human as you. No, you will never be seen as an equal human in that structure. You will always be dehumanized. So the solution to that is not to now get recognition in the zone of being. It's to destroy the institutions that produce zone of being, non-being. That's what Fanon is talking about. The rest is bull. The rest is bull, because we're just going over the surface. We're not going deep down into the problem. So what are the epistemic implications of this? There are epistemological implications. And one of the implications is that all the critical theory we know is based on the knowledge produced, or the theories produced, based on the social historical experience of an oppressed in the zone of being. All the critical theory that we are reading in the Westernized university and by the white left, by the Westernized left, is based on the social historical experience of oppression of the other in the zone of being. Marx and Marxists are thinking in terms of the Western proletariat oppression. They don't know anything about what it means to be a slave in the other side, okay, in the periphery. They haven't theorized that. For that, you need to read other authors. You cannot read that in these authors, okay? You have zone oppressions, also woman oppression, for example. You have a lot of feminist theory that is based on the social historical experience of a woman in Paris or a woman in New York. but they haven't thought what it means to be a Muslim woman. They haven't thought what it means to be a black woman. They haven't thought what it be a brown woman, a Chicana woman, etc., an indigenous woman. For that, you have other forms of feminism that have produced knowledge in relation to that. Okay? Other forms of feminism that have been forced to develop their own theory to understand their own oppression that cannot be subsumed under Western woman theory of oppression. Okay? But what happened is, all these theories, and also national colonial oppression, queer theory, etc., you have this split in zone of being, non-being, in how you theorize this. This is one of the epistemic implications. That I don't have any problem if the critical theories produced based on the historical experience of oppression in the zone of being represent themselves as particular, as someone who says, okay, I'm a Marxist, I have theorized what it means to be class oppression in the zone of being, but I cannot, from my theory, understand what it means to be a slave in the same system. What it means to be a colonial subject exploited in the third world. I don't know that. For that, you need to read Fanon. You need to read Cecil. You need to read Angela Davis. You need to read other authors, Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui. I respect that. There's no problem if they assume themselves to be particularistic as any other theory. Okay? I don't have any problem if the white feminist tell me I'm theorizing based on the experience of a woman in Paris oppressed here, or a white woman oppressed in New York. I have no problem with that. The problem is that they come and represent themselves as universalistic, and then they try to develop their theories as if their theory will exhaust all the explanation of oppression in the world. And if you want to understand any kind of explanation, you need to read them. And then the theories produced by women of color to think about oppression of a woman of color, or the theories produced by people thinking about oppression, national colonial oppression, Palestinian oppression, indigenous oppression in the third world, those theories are always considered inferior. They're never taken seriously. That's called epistemic racism. And I call those theories of the left, of the white left, a colonialism from the left. Because they come with the same universalistic pretensions and with the same epistemic racism, sexism that you find among the mainstream imperialist right wing. And in that sense, they touch their hands together. That is, in relation to this question, there are variations of the right. There's no left or right here. There are variations of the right. And to keep calling them left is already a problem in the way we are conceptualizing this. So we only get more confused by calling them left. These are variations of the right. That's what we have. So I was not shocked when last Monday the press was saying, "Le choc." No, because Marine Le Pen has won. For me, it was not shock. If you are doing National Front politics, you know, in the name of a socialist party, what do you expect? People are going to vote for the original, not for the photocopy, like Mr. Le Pen used to say 10 years ago. People are going to vote for the original. So the point I'm trying to say is that then there is an impasse, to finish. There is an impasse between the white left and the movements coming from the zone of non-being in terms of how to work together.
Yes.
And part of that impasse has to do not with the people below the line of the human, has to do with that white westernized left that think of themselves as universal in their theories, okay, and that pretend that the theories on the other side are inferior to their theories. And so they don't come in a dialogic way, they come in a monologic way to try to build political alliance. In other words, what they want is that you vote for them or you follow them. But they don't think of the reality that the movement below the line of the human has autonomy of thought and autonomy of demands. And so you need to depart from the reality that we are talking about different forms of oppression and that the theories produced in one zone cannot explain what happened in the other zone. We need different theories to account for that. And we need to have then some kind of conversations there that is the white left need to be decolonized. If they don't get decolonized, there's no possibility of fighting back the dominant power structure because that white left is already participant of the premises of the white power structure. And therefore, there's no possibility of a political alliance that could be radical under their umbrella. So we need to develop ways to, in a sense, do some kind of a battleground, ideological battleground with the white left, to decolonize the ranks and their epistemologies from this kind of universalism that is only reproducing more of the same. And this has a lot of political implications. I cannot continue developing. I have to stop. Thank you.